Heyo. So, I've been watching a lot of movies from my past recently, and it makes no sense to, make a video for each and every one of them. So I thought, hey, why not just make a video just talking about a bunch of them? So the first one on our list is Big Fat Liar. And you know what? This movie holds a special place in my heart because this was probably like the first movie I watched that was like not a Disney original movie or an animated movie. It was something completely different, completely, fresh and new to us. And the funny story is we actually watched, like me and my sister, we actually watched this at one of my mom's friend's house because they had to go somewhere, and just to keep us entertained, they just put this movie on, and that's how I came to watch Big Fat Liar. And you know what, this movie still holds up. Like, I'm so happy it still holds up. And I think the biggest reason this movie holds up is because of the brilliant acting by Paul Giamatti. Like, this guy is so good. This was the first time I ever saw him act in a movie, and to this very day, when I'm watching like a movie like The Holdovers or something like that, this guy, because of his performance in Big Fat Liar, will always just appeal to me so much. Like, he is so good in this film. Like, he gives it his 100%. Like, it's like a movie for kids, but he is so animated, he is so mean, he is so nasty, and it's so wonderful to see how much energy he brings to the movie. The last arc of the movie is still incredible. Like, the way they unroll all the pranks on him and everything, brilliant. Like, actually, just, it's so good. It's still so good. I think this movie also benefits from a lot of great characters and moments, like such as the limousine driver, Marty Wolf's assistant, Jaleel White. Man, that scene of him talking to that chicken is still so funny. Like, it still makes me laugh for some weird reason. And so yeah, like, this movie has such an abundance of like good like side characters that really have like unique moments, and that just makes the movie age really well and just is still like a really nice watch to this very day. And I think one other great thing about this movie is just the plot twist of having an army of people hating on Marty Wolf and them actually like joining in on the whole last arc of like actually messing with him and getting the confession out of him. And I think the idea of the movie is also so unique and just inspired. Like, you have a kid who writes a story and it's stolen by a Hollywood producer, and he is now making a movie on it, and he flat out is denying that this kid ever wrote it, and he is the meanest person alive to everyone that works with him or anyone he's involved with. It's like, it's such a unique, fun idea, and the way they sort of like play around with the idea and have these really good moments with it is just such a nice watch. It makes it such a nice watch. The next movie that we have on this list is Stormbreaker, or as it's sometimes known as Alex Rider Operation Stormbreaker, which is just a lot of words. I don't know why it's like listed like this now. When I watched the movie as a kid, it was like known as Stormbreaker. But basically, if you were born in the early 2000s, at some point in your life, you would see an Alex Rider book in some other kid's hand. Like, this book series was so insanely famous, like as famous as book series like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson. Like, at some point, this book series really captivated people my age because they were just written so well, and they had like a long run of books that were thoroughly engaging. Like, every mission had its own like unique thing about it. But this movie is basically, the way I would describe it, as not as bad as I thought it was going to be on a rewatch, but it's not great at all still. Like, it's in a weird spot where I am like, okay, this isn't that bad, but like, I also realized this movie is actually kind of bad. And the weird thing is, I was actually just surprised at the cast of characters in this movie. You have actors like Ewan McGregor, Alicia Silverstone, and Damian Lewis. Like, I was actually in shock when one of these people appeared one by one on the screen, because I'm like, this movie had a proper cast of characters and it's bad. I'll tell you what the weird thing about this movie is. The weird thing about this movie is that the beginning, like the first half, is like, like a normal teenage spy adventure movie type thing. But the second half is weird because the first half really undermines the plot points near the end of the movie, because this villain, the villain in the movie, literally wants to kill thousands of children. Like, just kill them in one fell swoop, just kill all these children. And so the tone of this movie feels really weird for a very like scary and dark plot at the end, and it's just not as great as I remembered it to be. Like, I actually am scared that if I were to reread this book, like the Stormbreaker book, it would also be like not that great. Like it would not age that well. And I'm just really scared because this is one of my favorite book series growing up. But let's not get into that. So, Rider Operation Stormbreaker, do not even watch as like a, funny reminiscing of your past or anything. It's just bad. There's nothing to reminisce about this movie. Like it was actually like a painful watch by the end of it, but I just had to get through it for this video. Yes, finally we have our Disney original movie for this list. And it's actually a movie I think that's not talked about enough, and it's Geek Charming. So the reason why I love this movie is because first 15 minutes or so, it's like, okay, normal Disney movie where you have the awkward guy, the girl, and you have the bully, and it's like, the same regular like American high school sort of stuff that you have in most Disney Channel original movies, right? But the interesting part is within the first 20 minutes of the movie where Sarah Hyland's character, Dylan, is basically at her house, and you actually discover the reason why she is so obsessed with the Spring Blossom Queen. And it's because her mom actually passed away when she was really young, and she was the Spring Blossom Queen. And it's really interesting because I think it's probably one of the few Disney Channel movies that I watched growing up that had an element of death to it, which is something that you didn't see a lot in movies. And it's a very big driving factor of the movie, and it's really nice and really refreshing because it kind of paints a bigger picture and a bigger purpose as to why she is doing all this campaigning for Spring Blossom Queen and all this. And so you're actually rooting for her when you find out the story about her mom passing away and that she was Spring Blossom Queen. And you as the audience actually find out before anyone in the movie. So when the characters are interacting with Dylan, you know the secret of why she is campaigning so hard for Blossom Queen. It's because she has a bigger purpose to it. And so actually the annoying, popular girl is actually the person that you're rooting for in a bizarre change of events, because usually you do not like these people in movies. They are portrayed as the villains, but in this one, you're actually rooting for her. I think one other really interesting thing about this movie is that it actually has the mockumentary style of like shooting, interviews and everything, which you see in shows like The Office and Modern Family. And the surprising thing is that Sarah Hyland goes on to be in Modern Family. There's an interesting bridge between this movie and Modern Family because she does the mockumentary style of like, an interview in this movie as she's talking about, her mom and like why she wants to be Spring Blossom Queen. And I think that's a really, really cool thing. I think one other aspect that I always really appreciate about this movie is how a popular person was smart. Like I think that was always like one factor that really surprised me in this movie, is because usually like the popular kids in these movies are like the dumb ones and they're just popular, but Dylan, Sarah Hyland's character, is smart and she's popular. And so I always found it really interesting how like this movie was able to create a character that had just more dimensions to them than just being popular, because I really appreciate that, because growing up it was always like popular person, they're dumb, and like it was always like very typical and very like easy to read. But this movie, when I watched it like growing up, I was like, damn, this is interesting, this is so different. And I honestly like all the elements of this movie that make it really unique are also like present in the movie that's shown at the end about Dylan's character and how she is more than just someone who's just popular. She has these sides to them and everything. And I think that's really like the driving force behind this movie. It kind of shows how people can be different and there are sides to them that they choose to reveal, sides of them that they chose to hide. Like how Dylan's character chose to get rid of her old best friend and decide to get new ones because it was at a point where she lost her mom and she probably needed a bit of a change and everything. And so really great movie. It's always a nice rewatch after a few years and it holds up pretty well still. The fourth movie on this list is actually a movie that was supposed to be sort of a sequel to Space Jam, but I think it just became its own entire different thing, and that is Looney Tunes Back in Action. Now, growing up, I had watched Space Jam and I watched this movie, but for some reason, I think this movie has a softer spot in my heart because of how weird and goofy it is. Because Space Jam, it's fun, it's like a family-oriented movie, but Looney Tunes Back in Action is just weird and I just love it. As a movie released in 2003, it obviously has Brendan Fraser. Like, this movie is already so 2000s with its plot and just general vibe, and then you see Brendan Fraser and you're just like, holy shit. Like, as someone who grew up in the 2000s, I am instantly transported back to my childhood. And it also has Steve Martin as the villain, which I never clocked as a kid, but I think Steve Martin does a really nice job in this villain role also. And basically the plot of the movie is that Warner Brothers basically doesn't want Daffy Duck to be casted alongside Bugs Bunny, and they want Bugs Bunny to be front and center of all their movies. And so Daffy Duck just kind of like fired, and he basically gets involved with Brendan Fraser's character Damien, whose dad is a renowned spy actor but turns out to be a spy actually, and is basically kidnapped by Steve Martin's character Mr. Chairman. And essentially Damien has to rescue his dad from Steve Martin. Oh, and also prevent Steve Martin's character Mr. Chairman from turning every single person on the planet into a monkey. Yeah, that's the whole evil plan of this villain. It's a really dumb plot and I love it, and I think all the scenes, all the moments in this movie are just really well done, because it actually utilizes a lot of the characters in the Warner Brothers universe of like the Looney Tunes, right? And a bunch of other ones also that you see in the background here and there at the studio and in different places. I think the CGI has also like aged decently. Like, come on, it's from the 2000s, it's not the best, but it's really interesting and has a character of its own. Like when the live action actors are actually interacting with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, like you can clearly see that they are not there. But honestly, like I think that's just the charm of this movie, that's what makes it so enjoyable as a rewatch after so many years. And it's just a fun film. Like, I would highly recommend it if you are interested, especially if you like Space Jam. Not the second one, that's terrible obviously, but the first one with Michael Jordan. And the last movie we have in this video is actually another Frankie Muniz movie, but it's not Agent Cody Banks 1, it's Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination London. Personally, I prefer the sequel to the first one just because I think it's a bit more fun and a bit more engaging, I would say. And I also just love Anthony Anderson in this movie. Like, he's actually like such a big highlight of the movie that it completely overshadows the first one. The first one just, it's alright, it's okay. But I think the second one really shines because you actually see the camp, you actually see, you know, like the kids engaging in all these like, you know, drills and spy exercises and all that. Like, as a kid, that was the coolest shit I had ever seen. And I think it adds a nice charm to the entire movie of like actually seeing the camp where all these kids are trained and everything. And I think just like the setting in like a music school, like a big fancy music school, is just so fun. Like, it's so different, it's a different country, you have Anthony Anderson, and you have a bunch of like, you know, actually like good characters. Like, the villain in the second movie is so much more appealing than the villain in the first one, because the second one like has a villain come from within the organization itself. And I think just the last half of the movie is just so fun with the whole mind control stuff, and like how Cody Banks actually gets like the mind control thing on him and he starts acting like a double agent. It's so weird and goofy and it doesn't make any sense, but it's still just so fun. And I think the movie ends off brilliantly with that performance that the music school does at the conference thing. Like, it's such a good performance to this very day. Like, I loved it as a kid and it's still so good because it acts like such a good backdrop to the ending of the movie with all the small fight scenes here and there with like, you know, all the good guys and all the bad guys. I think the sequel also has a lot of more memorable moments, like, you know, the Mentos exploding thing, woodwind buddies, and chocolate surprise. Like, those are all things I remembered, you know, when I was watching the movie. Like, I was like, holy shit, I remember all this. Whereas with the first one, like, I was watching it and I kind of just turned it off midway because nothing was really, you know, clicking with me. Like, there were no like funny moments or like even good plot points. Like, the plot is fairly simple with the first one. The second one is just weird and funny, and that's why I just prefer it. And yeah, I guess that's about it. I will probably be doing these kind of videos because I think it's just way more convenient and fun to kind of group all these movies together into one category and just talking about them. And yeah, if you like this format, let me know. But that's about it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. It's free for you, but it's prices for me. Go check out my music and go drink some coffee.